Hey, welcome to a brand new episode of The Console. I have a lot of new subscribers this past week. Welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you here. This past week was pretty exciting. Got a lot of press in the Twitter sphere about The Console, with a lot of people coming to the show that haven't seen us before. So I give you a very hearty and happy welcome to the show. This is also a big episode number for the show as well. Number 30. There have been 30 episodes of The Console so far. It's a weekly show, so when I hit 52, that's when you know it'll be a year, which isn't exactly true because I have taken a few weeks off just for mental sanity, but we're almost encroaching on a year, which is pretty crazy for me. So yes, this is episode 30, the week of March 5th through March 11th. This has been a fun week in the world of JavaScript. As I mentioned in my previous small video this past week, there was this whole big thing called Smooshgate, which I'm coining, I guess, because I don't think anyone else is calling that, but there's this whole thing that I'm talking about. That's the first thing in the episode, so definitely stay tuned for that. I was trying to figure out how I could do a bit at the beginning of this episode, because I usually have like some weird thing that I do in the beginning to make it a little bit fun and entertaining, and then all of a sudden I was eating a snack, and I realized that I have these flattened pretzels. So that's the bit right there. If you're curious why I keep talking about things that are flat and smooshed, well, let's get the show started. So let's talk about flatten. Oh. Ooh, that is salty. So the past week there was a big brouhaha about how there is a new proposal in the TC39 process. It's at stage 3 currently to add the .flatten and .flatMap methods to the array prototype. And if you don't know what flatten and flatmap is, flatten is a way to have an array of arrays and actually flatten it down to just one array, which you might have used before. Flatmap lets you map over the array and then flatten it, the results there as well, which is also useful. The big thing that happened this past week is that it was discovered that a old version, a 8-plus-year-old version of MooTools, a very old JavaScript framework, has a non-compatible implementation of flatten that it also adds to the array prototype itself. The reason why this is an issue is because the TC39 committee has a mandate, self-imposed, and also I think a good idea, that they never want to try to break the web. And what they mean by breaking the web is that if they add things to the web platform that modify behaviors that browsers of the past depend upon, or libraries or frameworks of the past depend upon, then all of a sudden these websites that have been very merrily on their way, going along and functioning properly, as soon as that new version comes out, break. Hence, breaking the web, which is probably a good thing to try to avoid, because you'd be quite upset if you made a website 5 years ago, used the latest and greatest tools at the time, published it online, it's there forever, you're calm, it's cool. All of a sudden next year Chrome comes out with a new version and just breaks your website because they wanted to take that namespace. That's kind of BS in my opinion. So as a way to resolve this issue, they had in my opinion, kind of a joking thread to rename .flatten to .smoosh to avoid that conflict. And the Twitter sphere kind of went mad with worries, concerns, and stress about the oddness and weirdness of that name choice. There is probably a 0% likelihood that this is going to happen, but the reaction from the community was funny to see from a distance. I think some people were very upset. I never really took it seriously, so I was having a nice light touch from my perspective, but there are 3 options going forward to resolve this issue. The first one, as proposed in that GitHub thread, is to rename flatten to something else like smoosh or some other synonym. This is not the best idea in my opinion, because smoosh is also not very an obvious name. You're very used to .flatten. I'm sure there's other things you can come up with, like compact or something, but that's still to be decided. Number 2, which is actually my favorite resolution to this whole issue, is that the main difference between the MooTools implementation of .flatten and the TC39 implementation of .flatten is the depth upon which the flatten function goes into the array. So if you have an array of arrays, that's a depth of 2. By default, the TC39 implementation has a depth of 1, and the MooTools implementation has a depth of infinity. So one resolution to that is to actually change the TC39 implementation from 1 to infinity to match MooTools. Hence, when it gets introduced, it will then behave the same, not breaking any websites that depend upon that behavior. I kind of like that. Infinity seems good. Might be expensive if you don't understand the ramifications of it. Get some infinite loops, which would always be fun to do, but that's a resolution. And the third option, which is not the best option, is to break the web. Just break it. Break it. Now I have to eat this. So that's Smooshgate. It's going to be in the TC39 process for a little bit longer. This proposal, flatten and flatmap, are already stage 3, and this is the part of the process where they're trying to unearth these edge cases. So this is going as planned. There was a bit of a hyperbole that made these things blow up out of proportion, but, you know, people be people, programmers be programmers, and I be eating crackers. Pretzels. Staying in the world of TC39, well, I guess more specifically Chrome, there was a tweet this past week about how public and private class fields are now built into Chrome by default. They're not enabled by default, they're still behind a flag, the experimental JavaScript flag that you have to enable to actually see these things, but that means that the ability to actually have public class fields, where you can actually have a better syntax for making a public class field, or private class fields, which is this hash symbol, which I believe I talked about in a previous episode, but it's a way to actually encapsulate hidden behavior so you can actually have a little bit more robust classes. Well, support for this is now in V8 itself, meaning that if you actually wanted to not worry about Babel, you could. Granted, your user would have to then use Chrome and enable experimental flag, and you probably don't want to deal with that yet, but it means that it's going to be on its way towards this stable branch, which is very cool. It also means that it's going to be coming to Node when Node upgrades to the V8 version that has support for this. It's going to be in V8 6.6. Node 9.x is currently on V8 version 6.2. So there's still some time before you can do native private and public class fields in Node. You'll still have to transpile down until that's the case, but this is a new feature that is coming soon to you. Cool. And staying with Google Chrome, I've actually outlined this console log pretty well, actually. It has a nice little flow to it, if I do say so myself. Chrome this past week had a conference where they actually announced a pretty amazing fact to me, is that the usage of Flash has declined from 80% usage, where people have gone to at least one page containing Flash content, 80% in 2014, and then today, in 2018, it's now under 8%. That's crazy. That is a huge decline in usage. And it makes sense because Adobe already announced last year that they're going to stop supporting Flash at the end of 2020. That also means that Chrome version 87, which will be funny to see when that number comes out, which it will in December 2020, will actually be the last, will be the version of Chrome that will remove Flash as a built-in support in the browser. So Flash is on its way out. I'm happy about it. I'm sure you're happy about it. I'm sure you already knew this, but to see that sharp decline is just even very cool to see. So it didn't really disappear in a flash, but if you, you get it. And to round off this episode, let's go back to the land of React, where there are a fun, experimental, and just kind of brainstorming type ideas being thrown out into the world this past week in the land of React that I just wanted to give you a high-level touch view about them. One is that the React Suspense async React that I was talking about this past week, there is now a live code sandbox demo that somebody threw together that you can kind of take a peek at to kind of like see what it looks like if you're interested in it. Again, it's not in React right now. You don't have to worry about it. It's going to come out later. There'll be more details as it comes later. But if you are excited and curious about what that bleeding edge looks like, there is now a online demo for you to play around with. There is also one of the core maintainers of React had a tweet about an alternative way that higher order components could pass in properties to components using additional parameters to functions and also classes. Again, kind of neat to figure out how to make higher order components a little bit more easier to use. There was a new RC added to the React RC proposal about how to make it easier to forward references to elements in the DOM. So this is very useful with higher order components where you have a higher order component with a component inside of it. You want to get a reference to that, and instead of having a custom property to the higher order component, you can just have a way to actually forward that ref together. There was also a third very, very experimental idea to add a new adopt keyword to the JSX syntax to make it easier to use render props, which is very experimental, very forward-thinking, but it's always good to think outside the box to kind of see where things could be pushed to. Okay, and that was the console log, episode 30. Thank you to all the new subscribers that are here on this channel. I hope you are enjoying the content that I am sharing with you. If you want to see and hear about different things, let me know in the comments. If you are not already a subscriber, do subscribe down below, because then you can see more of my pretty smiley face as I talk about things very rapidly, more than my brain can actually keep up with it. It just kind of squeezes out my mouth before I can actually think about what I'm saying. In any case, hope you have a good week of coding, and I will see you again next week on the console log. Bye-bye.